Bob Mizer, 89 years old. So I'm probably one of the few people left from that era that you guys are here to talk about it. But they were both such towering figures in the gay erotic art. I mean, Bob Mizer worked for 50 years, produced over 1 million images, and Tom of Finland also. I mean, these are two iconic people that come along, once in a century. So I was very proud to be part of that. That time, I would say my work is, compared to theirs, which is a huge body of work, mine is like a footnote to that period. But nevertheless, we did our own kind of thing, and I think it was a lot of borrowing back and forth stylistically and the kind of people we actually drew or photographed or whatever. Are you going to go into what are you going to do the talk here, or are you going to do it?
Do you want to move into the?
Well, I like to get everybody. Let me get the corner so we bring more people in here.
Maybe you could talk about also some of the materials that the small display in the case about Courtney and how those sheets were distributed originally.
Beginning. So I started photographing about 1954, and my initial idea was to be a young man and get their pants off.
Still is.
I'm a Greek chorus here. Anyhow, so I started taking pictures, and my first pictures were really pretty horrible. I mean, terrible backgrounds, terrible poses. The guys were really bad attractive, and they didn't have any bodies. But then I started we got into this, and I thought, well, I'll stop worrying about getting their pants off and really do something that might be considered art. So I said, in like 54, and then into 55, I get pretty good. So at that time, one of the most important magazines that everybody read was Tomorrow's Man. It was a little, I call it tabloid size little magazine, it's about this big. So you could buy clandestinely on the newsstand in some tacky store or something like that, or some gay venue. And it was published for different people. One time it was published in Chicago by, I can't remember his name now.
Irv Johnson.
Irv Johnson, yes, thank you, Alex. And then they went to New York. And by the way, Alan Harmon is my curator and my archivist who started me on this road, and I'll explain how that happened. So I thought that some of my work had some merit. So I thought, well, let me send this up to Tomorrow's Man and see if we get any feedback. Well, the art director who did this photography thought they were pretty good. He said, well, if you want to contribute to us on a continuing basis, let me give you some free advertising that you can sell your stuff, which everybody did. Everybody sold their stuff. And I said, that's fantastic. And of course, in that time, everything was covered up. We also photographed people in either posing straps or carefully hidden genitalia. So, but as it went along, I thought my work improved. It got better as it went being published. And I got a lot of wonderful feedback. So it became a very lucrative business. In that time, I made quite a bit of money selling these things. So then I decided at some point that, well, why don't we do news? I mean, my photographs were really one person in the picture. Nobody was touching the genitalia. They were doing the thing that would be considered even barely erotic. So I thought, well, let's do some nudes in the same vein. We'll just do nudes, nobody touching themselves, no erections, but we'll just do a beautiful photograph of a man. Or you might say a photographic aid. So I did that, and unfortunately, unknown to me, and Bob Mizer experienced the same thing. I was arrested for doing this, and I spent a couple nights in jail. And the New York U.S. Postal Service and New York Police Department in concert came and confiscated everything. My camera, my lights, my equipment, money, negatives, photographs, everything. Clean sweep. I think later, like 20 years later, I discovered 3 original negatives. So it was a clean sweep, and as Dirk mentioned, their aim was not so much to making money, but just to put you out of business. And it was a very repressive time in the 50s, because it was in New York, it was during the administration of a rather homophobic mayor named Wagner, and they closed gay bars. And a bar would be closed, and it would say on the door, this premises has been closed because it was frequented by homosexuals and or undesirables. So that's the kind of atmosphere we lived in. Plus, the post office department under Eisenhower wanted to stamp out pornography in the mails. So I was caught up in that whole mail strip of that period. So I was arrested, and fortunately I had an attorney on retainer, so I didn't spend too much time in jail. So it drug on for another year or so until I finally came, and I had a partner, and of course he was arrested too. And but then we had the court case for the two. So I got particularly unscathed. But we started trying to separate the two studios, which was John Palatinus, my name, from the other studio was called Courtney. So we had two distinct studios, and we kept some stuff hidden in another area. So we separated the two businesses, so you shouldn't know that they were the same company. Well, the police department followed me around for 2 or 3 months. And they finally, did all this surveillance. They actually, when I had to get a quantity photography company to do my printing for me, and apparently the policeman followed me around. And I was just telling some of the guys a story about this guy following me around. Well, in those days, I was like my late 20s, and I was a compulsive tea room cruiser, and I cruised all the subways in New York, up the IRT, 29th Street, 19th Street, 23rd, across, doing all the toilets back down. I was actually compulsive about that. So after I was arrested, the policeman said, this guy, he must have an awfully small bladder. So anyhow, so we had the trial, and at the trial, which was very prophetic, the judge said, well, by community standards today, this has to be considered pornography. And that's the catch there, the hook they use, by today's community standards. Well, every community has different standards. In any case, said, by community standards, it must be considered pornography. He said, who knows, maybe 50 years from now, it will be considered art. Well, so anyhow, fast forward, I saw my attorney said, look, John, you got absolutely unscathed. Why don't you just close the door on that part of your life? So I went back to work at some tacky job making $90 a week and rehabilitated myself. Closed the door, fast forward 50 years. Well, about 19 which?
Well, no, it was
2009.
2009.
2009. A friend of mine said, John, there's some of your work on a blog online. I said, really? He said, yeah, you got to say they said that when you're alive or dead. I said, oh, well, that's interesting. So I looked at it, I saw the blog, and I sent the person a note, and I said, I'm very much alive. Where do you live? I didn't know where you live. Well, it happened. Helen Harmon, who is my curator, my archivist, and has his blog, lived 13 miles away. So that was the beginning of a fast friendship, and we have now had shows, 9 shows in Europe. We've had shows in London, Paris, Berlin, Antwerp. We're going to have a show in Oslo, in Norway. We have, if you're going to be in Oslo, Norway, we have to shoot. Here are some flyers for that. And so we built this up, and Alan worked very hard. He would take we would buy things from eBay. We'd buy something from a collection somebody had, or from the magazine. He sat there at the computer recreating all this stuff. So none of our stuff is original. We have, like I say, we have 3 negatives in art. The horse stuff's all been recreated from Photoshop. Well, we got pretty good images, considering. And Alan worked very hard at producing this stuff. So we have at this point about, we're coming close to 50 images that we've created from nothing. So I'll show you a few of those images. This image here was considered because it's our corporate image. And this is a young man that I photographed in New York City who was 22 years at the time. And he was also kind of typewriter also. And he had this absolutely incredible body. Look at this waist on this man. He like had a waist that would look like that. Just incredible. Well, anyhow, so he moved then to the West Coast, and he had some rich job that put him in business. And he established the bar in San Francisco called The Stud, and also Folsom Barrel. Maybe some of you all know those 2 places. The Stud, I don't know if they still exist anymore, but he created those 2 bars. Well, and then later in his life, he became a sex change. Right. And he lived the rest of his life as a woman, and he's still alive. So this is really
still owns the building.
Yeah, and he owns the powerhouse. Yes, he owns the powerhouse. And so this was one of our first New York people. I bring up to say my work was in New York and Indiana, where I photographed just mostly straight young boys who wanted to be photographed because they wanted to see the progress in the gym, but they worked out. So then when I moved to New York, it was more gay and straight boys, both. And some were professional models also. So we started out, so this is some of the first of the New York series. This was another photograph. This was an actual construction worker. I picked up on the street. That's why a lot of my mother's on the street. And he was actually starting to work. He got his helmet on with his name. He was a straight guy. And so he, I said, I like the photograph. I said, well, why? I said, well, you know, I think you have a great body and a good face. I think you're very photogenic. So he said, okay. So he came down and he says to me, well, you're a gay guy, aren't you? I said, well, yeah, I'm gay. He said, well, you know, I don't always like to be gay. This is after we did the session. He said, can I try it out? I said, well, okay. You can see I was very reluctant about it. And so we got to dress, we go to the bed, and I get in the bed, I made a really big mistake. After doing a few slides on where, I try to kiss it. That was enough. No! Let's get out of it. That was it. So that was the end of that. Anyhow, he was a pretty sweet guy, and I think this is a great photograph of him. We also have one in the front. Now here is a guy I call our masked sword man, and I don't know what his orientation. I think he was gay. I'm not sure. He had a gigantic cock, and but he didn't want to show his whole face. And so, if you notice it, this is a very nice large penis. Now, when you saw all the things of Tom of Finland, all those cocks are very much exaggerated. They look wonderful. And of course, we look at that, we say, that can't be powerful. But we want to believe, right? We want to believe. Hallelujah. Yeah, absolutely. Anyhow, so we did this whole series of him, which was a very successful series. And people still buy this. In fact, is Dan Platt, are you here? Well, we did a series of T-shirts with this on the front of the T-shirt. And this was one from my leather series. And it was called Bob and Brad, and there were two other guys, and they were lovers. And the only leather people I really photographed during that period. And so you can see, it's amazing, this quality. This is a reproduction from either a magazine or a print, a very good print. So it's amazing that you can get that kind of quality on photoshopping in this day. I think it's fantastic. And this one here was another chap of mine who was another very high-class hustler in New York. He had a bona fide 8.5-inch dick. And we did the photographs. My partner, actually a roommate of mine, not a partner, showed all the photographs. They were made out of wool jersey, and we took them and we wet them. So they would sit close to the genitalia. Let me say genitalia. Close to the cock. So you can see all the delineation. So, and I want to say that when we look at the pictures of Tom of Finland and pictures of that era, you know, Tom of Finland shows huge basket, huge cocks, and people really dressed like that in the 50s. I mean, every big cock or whatever cock, you would show it at your pants, like some of the rock stars, like the Ramones and people like that. You'd see their baskets and some of these other groups. And people really show up their dicks. We are in an era now when nobody shows any basket. There's no cocks on the screen. They're disappointing. So this was where people really went around, showing whatever they had. So it was a wonderful time. So, but he was a terrific guy, a very bright young man. So, and this was probably my most popular model, who was Matt Carroll, and he typifies a kind of the Italian-American boy of that period in the 50s, what we call the bunch of grapes hairdo, which hung down on his forehead. And he also had an extraordinarily large cock. He was great, and he'd let anybody touch it, you know. But he would kind of sort of manipulate so it looked good. And we did, and then he was one of the first models I actually photographed in the nude when they got me in big trouble. So, but a beautiful man, and this was one that we probably sold most of, or anyone loved. At the time he was like 21, I think, something like that. And just, this is a sweet guy. This was a Canadian model, and he was part of my sailor series. And this was, he was from Canada, and he had posed for other photographers, and I wanted to make him a sailor because I like, you know, we all dealt, like Tom and Bob, we all dealt in the American icons, you know, the sailor, the cowboy, you know, whatever. But these are the great American icons, the policeman, the construction worker. These are enduring, you know, symbols for all of us. So, but I thought he was a particularly good model because look at his tiny little waist, his beautiful big upper body, and I don't think I have any photographs of him showing. I think I photographed him nude finally, but I thought this was really, now if you look at all these photographs I've shown you, is there anything that's really pornographic about this? I don't think so. I mean, there are beautiful pictures of men. I'm glad the genitalia was shown, but it wasn't, you know, awful. Nobody was playing with themselves. It was a beautiful picture of a man. So this was considered pornography. Now, of course, when I started doing the other thing, it did push it over in the cliff, so to speak. And this is one of our, the last one is a photograph of a young man who I think was 22, had one of the most beautiful glasses I've ever seen. And fortunately, you have this magic moment, like Avedon used to say, there's a magic moment or a perfect moment when everything comes together. The lighting, the model, just the pose, everything. This was a photograph of a perfect moment. Beautiful, the lighting, everything was perfect. And this has been a very, very popular some of ours today. And people love this. I mean, now I have some cards here. You can have of that. I know I have nothing around. If you're two of you, take one, so it might be a few for other people. I think I have some more back here. And so anyhow, so again, I think these archives, like the one archive and the foundation, are so important for us to support and contribute to them. If you have that strange uncle, you'll have that stuff under his bed, and then his stuff in the archive. This is our gay patrimony. This is what we're about. It's our gay history. And so it's very important not to support these people, give them money, go to their shows, contribute to them. And if you have works of art like this, you have, and they're interested in ephemera, in books, in autographs, and all the things that they've described before. So please support these people. And thank you all so much for coming. This was an absolutely enjoyable experience.
I'd like to thank everybody here for coming. There is food and there's wine and drink out front.